So 4-3 slope-intercept form. So we've talked about this a little bit, but now we're going to get a little bit more in depth. We're going to break it down. Okay, this information right here, I want you to, it is all important, okay? And it breaks it down in words for you, but we're going to go through each one. So it says linear relationships can be written in the form y equals mx plus b. This is called slope-intercept form. We have talked about this form already, okay? So some of this is going to be a little bit of review, but it's slope-intercept form, okay? I copied over some of that. I need to fix that. Okay? When an equation is written in this form, m represents the slope, b represents the y-intercept. We've talked about that before too, right? Okay? So I want you to write this equation down here. Okay? And so I want you to circle M or box it, whatever floats your boat. And I want you to label that your slope. Okay? We've also talked about that being rise over run. Hopefully you can write it in better than I can. Okay? And then this last one is my B. The sign in front of it always goes with it. And it is your y-intercept. Okay? So y-intercept, the sign in front of it makes it positive or negative. So if it's a subtract sign, it makes it a negative. If it's an add sign, it's positive, of course. But the thing is, like somebody said, it's -2. So I said it's -2, and they were like, no. And I'm like, yes. -2 and -2 mean the same thing, okay? That is the same thing, period, okay? So don't get stressed out by -2 and -2. They're the same. If you do walk that on the number line, it works out the same, okay? So the y-intercept of the line is the y-coordinate of the point in which the line crosses the y-axis. So look down at this graph. The y-axis is this line right here, okay? So your y-intercept that we're talking about is where it crosses this line. So it crosses this line right there, okay? So that's your B, okay, for this one, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but I just want you to show it's where it crosses the y-axis. The slope refers to the constant rate of change of linear relationship. Slope determines the steepness of the line, so how much it goes up or down. Does that make sense? So like stairs are steep, it's how the steepness of the line, okay? We have talked about all these things, it's putting them all together, okay? So for example, if I were to label this first one, example 1, okay? It says y equals 4x plus 10. Y is 4x plus 10. What is 4? If we were to look at our labeling over here. What is 4 over here? Slope. So I'm going to label that as my slope. I know that y'all can see the pin stuff and you can't see it on the video after I record it, but you can see it. So I know that's annoying. Sorry, but okay. So 10, but that's a -10. That is our y-intercept. Okay. So that's how we're going to break it down each piece. Okay. So example 2 says use the slope-intercept form to graph the equation. Okay, so I already started talking about this a little bit when I was kind of describing things. So this equation graphed is this line right here. Okay, now we're going to talk about how they graphed it specifically. So what is your M? M is your slope. So if I look here, what's my M? 1/2. Okay, so we're going to break that down. We're going to say that's our rise over our run. Okay, and then what is our B based on that graph? Well, it is +3. So we're going to say it's 3. Okay, so when we graph an equation, our very first thing is to find our B. So you graph, so I'm going to write graph B first. Okay, so you graph your y-intercept first. Okay, so that's when I go to my y-axis, my line right here that I drew. Okay, and I look for 3. So I go up from my origin. Here's my origin, right? 1, 2, 3. So that's my first point. So that's how they graph this, okay? And then I take my rise over my run. So I rise from this point that I graphed, rise 1, run 1, 2. And that's my next point that I graph. Okay? Then rise 1, run 1, 2. That's my next point. Okay, so this is a positive slope, so that's why it's going up and to the right. The direct opposite of up and to the right is back and to the left. So that would be another point, back to the left. That would be another point, okay? So then I connect all my lines, and then I've graphed this line based on that, okay? It's not as hard as you think if you break it down piece by piece, okay? So we're going to go through these examples right quick. So I want you to look at number 1. All it's asking for is us to find the M and the B, okay? So first on this M, it's going to be right here with the X, okay? So it's going to be -5. But I want to graph it as a rise over our run, so any whole number is going to be graphed over, or is going to be set over 1. Does that make sense? Because we have to have, if we were to write it as a fraction, which is what rise over run is, that's how we would write it as a fraction. Now my second thing is B. Okay? That sign goes with it. Remember I said the sign comes with it. So my B is going to be -1. Okay? On number 2. Okay? Look. There's nothing there, right? Okay? So if there's nothing there, then that means there's a 1 there. If it's just X, there's a 1 in front of it. So it's going to say -1, but I'm going to put it in fraction form, so I put it over 1 because it's a whole number. Okay? Is there a B? No, there's no B, so I put 0 for my B. So it's going to cross at 0, 0. Okay? So we're going to talk about that here in a minute. Okay? Number 3. It's already in fractional form right here. Makes it easy. -2/3. Okay, what's my B? 8, +8. Okay, 4. We're going to have to solve this one, so I'm going to have to solve it. I need to get Y by itself, just like I did X by itself, okay? So I'm going to get Y by itself. I'm going to move everything away, so I'm going to move the 4X away. So I'm going to move it to that side. So I have Y equals 6 plus 4X. Well, that's in a different order, and that's okay. So we still, what's with the X? That's our slope. So it's still going to be 4 over 1. Let me make this a dot right there. And then our B is going to be 6. Okay, see how we got all those numbers? Okay, pretty simple and straightforward, right? Okay, so there's 2 examples of graphing. Okay, so the first one is Y equals -2X. So I'm going to say, what is my M? What is my B? Okay, so my M is -2 over what? 1. My B is, I don't have anything, so it's 0. Okay, so remember, what did I say earlier? I said graph the B first, right? So the B is 0, so I'm going to put a dot at 0. Okay, so here's what we didn't do. We didn't do a -1 earlier. So up and to the right is positive.
Down and to the left.
Okay, down and to the left is positive.
Down to the right?
So yeah, because remember our slope, if we're going up, this is positive. If we're going down the stairs, it's negative, right? I said that earlier. So we can graph it up still, but instead of going to the right, we're going to go to the left. One way, just one direction's got to be negative, right? So on the graph, which direction's negative? Left or down? Does that make sense? So we're going to go up and to the left. So we're rising 2, running 1. Okay? Rising 2, running 1. Lily. Okay? So I don't need to graph really many more than 3 points my line's not, I'm not going to say, oh, your line's off. It's going to, just do your best. Graph about 3 or 4 points, and that should be enough to draw your line, okay? So, that being said, I think that one's good. Okay, so let's look at our last example over here. Okay, so we have y equals negative 3x plus 1. So our m is negative 3 over 1. And our b is 1, positive 1. Okay, so graph your b first. You go to your origin, then go to 1, put a dot there. Okay, on the y-axis, that's where your b goes. Then you're going to go up. This is a negative also, so it's still going to be a negative slope. So we're going to go up 3 and run 1. We can go down 3 and run 1. Either way works, okay? And there's my graph. Okay, it's not terrible if you just remember which is your M, which is your B. Okay, so on your homework, you're going to have a lot of these, or not your, it's your classwork. You're doing it in class actually, but it's going to say homework. But I want you to label your M and your B. Even when you graph something, you're going to label your M and your B. The copy y'all have that, those notes, I put the wrong back on it. So we're going to grab a notes here page in just a minute.